Welcome to Profitable Women, a podcast for the female business owner who wants to build a profitable and sustainable business that aligns with their life. We will talk about the money stories impacting your decisions, financial strategies to grow your profits, and how to embrace your female superpowers. I'm your host, Sheila Hansen, certified public accountant, business mentor, and certified coach. As a mom of three and business owner, I have spent the last 7 years supporting six-figure business owners make confident financial decisions while raising my babies. After making the hard decision to leave my job at a public accounting firm when I had my oldest, I'm now on a mission to empower women to build wealth without sacrificing themselves. If you find yourself avoiding conversations about money, are burnt out from working all the time, wonder where your cash goes, or want to learn how to pay yourself six figures, you're in the right place. Remember, the information in this podcast is general in nature and for educational purposes only. For specific financial advice for your situation, please consult a professional. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to the show. Welcome back to another guest episode on Profitable Women. Today, I am so excited because I get to introduce to you my best friend, my honey, as we called each other in college roommates. She's technically my second cousin, so we've known each other since we were babies. She's my person. And so I want to introduce you to Terryn Drieling. Welcome to the podcast, Terryn.
I'm so excited to be here. It's going to be so fun.
I am bringing Terryn on to bring the topic of self-awareness to this podcast. So Terryn is a rural relationship guide, as we call her, who lives and works on a large ranch in the Sandhills of Nebraska with her husband and their three kiddos. She believes the stockmanship principle of good movement applies no matter what species we're interacting with. Over the past several years, she's taken what she knows from that principle, studied the Enneagram, read countless books on brain science, psychology, generational trauma, and communication. And now she's using what she's learned to develop programs to help draw good movement and navigate the highs and lows of marriage, family dynamics, and friendships in rural America. So Terryn, where did this whole concept of self-awareness start for you?
Well, I'm glad you asked because I don't know that all of your listeners will know what stockmanship is or good movement is. So I'm going to go over that.
Yes.
I grew up on a feed yard and Sheila would come just about every summer for a week and stay with us. And
it was always around county fair time because I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and we didn't have 4-H or livestock animals close by. That wasn't something I experienced. So my vacation, if you will, was to go out to the feedlot around county fair time and hang out with bucket calves and horses and do the things you do at county fair.
And it was always a blast. Always.
Yes.
So I grew up in rural Nebraska on a feed yard, riding horses, raising beef cattle. And then I studied feed yard management in college. And then I worked at a feed yard for 7 years before my husband took the job where he is now. And that was a ranch. So cows and calves versus cattle that are going on to become beef. And they're still cattle, same species, but the difference in how you communicate with each and how you feed each and how you care for each, it's a huge learning curve, even though the core principle is the same. And that core principle is that good movement draws good movement. Actually, that's probably not the core principle, but it's a really big part of it. And what that means is stockmanship is the art and science of handling cattle in a safe, effective, low-stress manner so that it keeps your cattle safe and you can move them around and you can handle them without stressing them out, stressing yourself out, getting them hurt, getting you hurt. And part of that is this idea of good movement. And good movement comes from being aware of your posture and positioning and being able to read what the animal is telling you. And then you're able to take what you know about yourself and what you know about the animal and communicate with them in such a way that you can ask them to move in whatever direction that you need them to go. And then their good movement, because it wasn't forced and it's not stressed, draws the good movement from the rest of the herd. So you can move an entire herd by moving one or two animals. And in the year of our Lord 2016, I was sitting in the pasture moving a herd of hundreds of head of cows and their calves all by myself. It was, well, not all by myself. I was the only human. I had also my dog with me. But we just started the first couple of pairs in the direction of the pasture that we needed to move to. And I just sat on a hill and watched as the cows started to pick up their calves and move off in the direction of those first few pairs. And I couldn't help but think, like, if we can do this with cattle, if we can communicate in this way, like this stress-free way where we understand each other, is that possible with humans? And 2016, if you'll remember, it was a hotly contested election year, which every election year is, but that was the first one where social media was booming. And I'm an Enneagram type 9, averse to conflict, and there was a lot of conflict. And so that was weighing heavy on my mind when I was sitting out there in the pastures. Like, if we can communicate this well with a different species, can we communicate this well with each other? And I ultimately concluded that not only is it possible, that it's also pretty necessary that we learn this principle of good movement in communicating with our fellow humans. And so I was blogging at the time. I didn't write about it for 2 years. Also an Enneagram 9 trait. But in 2018, I eventually wrote about good movement and how it applies to humans and cattle alike, actually every species. And there's so many other things that good movement applies to. But then that fall, I wrote the first post about good movement in the summer. And that fall is when you and I went to Christy Wright's Business Boutique Conference. And remember how everyone was like, I'm an Enneagram this, I'm an Enneagram this, I'm an Enneagram wing whatever. And I'm like, what is this?
Right. We had heard about some of the other personality types, Myers-Briggs.
At the time, it was Gallup Strengths Finder. And now it's like
Strengths.
Clifton,
Yep.
isn't it? Clifton Strengths Finder. It's the same thing, but just a different name.
Strengths, yeah. Your top 5 strengths are focusing on your strengths. We had no clue what they were referring to. And so we
Googled it. We Googled it.
Ourselves. Googled it.
Well, I didn't actually find my type for a little while later. I just Googled it when we were there. And then I was like, oh, cool. It's a personality typing system. And then later I was like, I'm going to take a test. So I took a test and it told me I was a type 7, which is wrong. But I recommend, if you're going to get into the Enneagram, read a book, which is then what I did. I was nerding out about it and listening to Annie F. Downs' Ennea Summer series on her podcast. And then I read the book, The Road Back to You, and realized I'm actually a type 9. But where this is leading us.
And I think I let you then help me determine my type.
Now I'm like, I kind of do that. I help guide people, but I didn't want to tell you were a 4, but you were a 4.
And then I got the book and I read it and I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Nobody has really explained my personality in this way, but yeah, check, 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 check. This helps me understand a lot.
So where this brings me is back to the idea of good movement, because good movement starts with self-awareness. And I think the Enneagram is the best personality typology for self-awareness because it's rooted in your motivations or the why behind your behaviors. Every other personality typology that I know of focuses on your behaviors. And that's all well and good, but I can't do anything about what I do unless I know why I do it.
And that then relates to a lot of when I'm talking with clients about money mindset or financial decisions. I can tell you the nuts and bolts of it, right? I can tell you, here's a plan, here's a path, here's the calculation or the financial way to do it. But what then comes up is your own why. There are hurdles or stories or your own mindset part of your personality that comes into that. And some of it is your experiences and what you grew up with or heard, and that impacts it. But then, some of it is just how you approach life in general, right? Two people are always going to look at one situation and have a different action or something they take because of their personalities. And so that then applies to the why as well when it comes to your finances and understanding that. So then you can make different decisions or go about it in a way that aligns with your motivations.
And what you were saying about experiences. So this is also what I find helpful about the Enneagram is because it helps you understand the lens through which you view the world. And so you might have siblings, we'll say, and you grew up pretty much the same. Your parents treated you pretty much the same, but you are two vastly different humans because of the lens through which you view the world. I interpret things differently than you do, than my siblings do. And so the experiences growing up in my house were really similar. However, my brothers and I reacted differently. Our behaviors were different because of our motivations or the lens through which we view the world.
Yes. And I have now learned to use that as a superpower of Terryn's. And I go to her to ask her to help me view situations from her lens. Because the other really cool thing about Terryn and Enneagram 9 specifically is they are able to see from multiple angles a situation. And so that has been a great benefit for me in being able to go to her.
It's a superpower and a curse, blessing and a curse, because sometimes I wish that I couldn't see so many shades of gray.
Okay, so you found out about your Enneagram and have used that as a tool now for this communication between you and animals, you and humans. What has been something along the way in that has just been really eye-opening or shocking to you in how these tools and this self-awareness come into play?
I don't know if it's necessarily shocking to me. Yeah, maybe it is. But just...
Or something that was just really cool when you saw it.
I don't know if it's cool. It's like, now that I am more self-aware and I am helping other people grow in their self-awareness, it is, as a 9, I'm trying to find a really polite way to say this, but I'm just going to say it. It's annoying to me when people don't want to be self-aware, which I get it. Ignorance is truly bliss, because when you become self-aware, it is hard to stomach.
It's hard to swallow. Yeah.
It can be. But also the reward, like the benefit, is so great. Like, I would not be helping other people in relationships. I would not be podcasting. I would not be traveling around to different farms and ranches and helping them grow as a team. I would not be doing any of that without being self-aware and knowing my motivations and where, like, I need to light a little fire under myself, because the weakness of 9s is sloth.
Or where to bring in help in a team so that you can do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are the specific ways that I can show up and I would show up, but then these other parts of that, I'm going to struggle to continually show up in that way. So let's bring in a team,
right,
or support in those areas so that I just have to show up for the parts that I am good at.
Yes. Example, my podcast. Example, my bookkeeping, which Sheila just sent me a message yesterday. Can you take inventory? Which I should have done at the first of the month, and now we're almost to the end of the month.
Yes. So that consistency, whether you have a podcast manager that holds you accountable to deadlines and timelines for submitting things, doing some of the parts of it that you would put off if it were up to you, where you can show up in the ways that you have skill set, right? In the way that I bug you for your bookkeeping numbers, I come to you when I have a conflict or a situation with somebody else and I need to see their side of it, right? So the self-awareness journey for me, I think really came from us digging into the Enneagram together. But then I think the whole idea of two people really having what you might consider similar experiences, but yet coming to different answers was when I became a parent. And my husband and I, on the surface, our childhoods weren't drastically different. There were a lot of similarities. And we ultimately agreed on like what was important to us as parents. But yet in the like small details of situations, there would be things that would come up for one of us or the other one of us that, you know, maybe triggered something or we just approached it differently. And it was like, dude, what's going on? Like, why did you do it that way? Or why did I do it this way? Or why are we not on the same page about this? And so that was really for me what kind of spurred self-awareness and the journey to then therapy and some other tools and tactics in addition to the Enneagram. And then led to me getting certified as a life coach too in, okay, there's this mindset piece that plays into all of this that I need to make sure we're not forgetting about when we're coming to the table to have a financial conversation.
Yes. Like everything, the foundation of everything is mindset and mental and emotional well-being. And so when I say I'm annoyed that people don't want to get self-aware, I also understand it because it is hard work. It is hard work. It's constant work too. It's constant work.
Oh yeah. There's no end journey or end destination to the journey.
There's no end. It's a journey, not a destination. But I've been on the journey for a while now, and you have too. And I've seen both of us make a lot of progress in our mindset, mental and emotional well-being, and seen what that has done for us and for our families and for our businesses. So I'm annoyed that other people don't want that.
When you've experienced something that's so good for you, and even though it was hard, but it was like, yes, this is exciting. This has benefits. Like, come on and do this. Like, why wouldn't you want to?
Yes. That's where the annoyance comes in. But also, I get it. Like, I get it. It is hard.
Yes.
And it's constant. Like, it's easier to go into a hard thing if you know there's an end to it. But telling you that there's not an end doesn't make you maybe want to do it anymore. Or like try it.
But I will say there are parts of it that maybe get easier.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the same level of hard as when you first start to take a look. Because I think that is one of the initial things that turn people off maybe about the Enneagram is it points out your flaws. It points out your weaknesses. And that, can be a little bit hard to look in the mirror and say, oh.
I call it itchy. It feels itchy.
Maybe that was me showing up in that way in the situation that caused the situation to turn out that way.
Yeah, it is definitely itchy and it doesn't always feel good. But the Enneagram doesn't just stop at saying, hey, here's why you behave the way you behave, and it's not that much fun. It shows you a path out of it. Like, that's another really cool thing that I personally love about the Enneagram is that it doesn't show you or tell you these are your strengths and these are your weaknesses. And here's how you strengthen your strengths and get rid of your weaknesses, because your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. The fact that I am motivated by keeping the peace is a really good thing. However, if I get stuck into my default cycles, keeping the peace becomes being complacent and falling asleep to my needs and desires and just withdrawing from life. So weakness and strength. And there are ways that I can get off my default circle and get into like make it more of a strength than a weakness. And like yours, your motivation of uniqueness, that is fantastic because you see the world in a completely different way.
And challenge the ways that everybody else is doing things. But then I can get stuck in wanting it or going too far with it needing to be too different or constantly changing it because it's starting to look this similar to something else. And then there's the whole roller coaster of emotions piece that comes along with my Enneagram type. And growing up, I always heard, you wear your emotions on your sleeve, which that can be a really good thing for somebody who isn't very good at reading emotions. If you are able to show them much easier, here's what I'm feeling, because it's out there in the open. But then the other side of that is because I have such a wide range of emotions and I can go from one to another very quickly, that allows me, and what I have learned is that allows me to sit with others in their uncomfortable feelings and emotions, where I'm like, we're on this roller coaster up and down every day. Like, let's go. And they're over there like hesitant to get in line for any level of emotion, where I can be the one to grab their hand and say, I'm going to be right here with you. We'll take this as you need, but we're going to feel these emotions because there's a lot of excitement that can come from this.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot you can learn from it.
And at the same time, if it's not exciting emotions, if it's darker, deeper emotions, there's still something to be learned from that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will step with you in discomfort because, again, my everyday, I'm there at some point in the day.
And if you don't want to step in the, shallow end of the pool, Sheila is ready and willing to jump in the deep end immediately.
And totally normal. Like, small talk to me is like, what? This is silly. What are we doing here? Let's get down into the deep, raw, exciting stuff. I get that might not be, things that the average person just wants to talk about on their normal day, but that's what I want to talk about. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot that can be learned from it. I mean, seriously, a lot that can be learned from it.
Yeah. Hey there, fellow female business owner. Are you tired of sifting through endless articles, resources, and scrolling social media just to find the nuggets of wisdom that actually apply to your journey? Well, I've got something just for you. When you join our weekly email list, you will receive a go-to resource with actionable tips, inspiring stories, and valuable insights tailored specifically for women entrepreneurs like you. Each week, we deliver a dose of empowerment straight to your inbox, covering everything from mastering your money mindset to navigating the ever-changing landscape. Join other like-minded women who are leveling up their business and living their dreams. Sign up for the weekly email today, and let's conquer the business world together. Head on over to the show notes and find the link for you to enter your email address to get started. You'll be the first to hear about upcoming masterclasses and have weekly action items to contribute to your success. Sign up today. So now that your business has changed over time, we didn't really talk about what Terryn was doing prior to this, but you have really seen a shift in what you're doing. And part of my messaging and podcast purpose is to empower women to align their business along with their life. And so kind of go into a little bit of your story as far as how things have changed through motherhood for you, throughout your business journey. What have you kind of learned along the way in adapting your business to where you're at in, let's call it, this season?
Okay. Yes. Let's do that. When I was working at the feed yard, I had the desire to start a blog just about how we raise beef and just as a resource for people. I wanted to be a resource. But when I was at the feed yard, I was working 6 days and then 2 days off. So 6 on, 2 off. And we had 2 small kids. Well, we had one and then another babies at that time. And it just really wasn't the priority to start the blog then. But when I resigned my post at the feedlot and moved to the ranch full time, huge learning curve, like I said. However, I was a stay-at-home mom, or as I like, it's more accurate if I just say take your kids to work every day mom, because I was also working on the ranch. But I had the flexibility to not be ranching. I could be in the house with the kids or whatever. And so I had more time. So I prioritized the blog, or starting a blog, and I started Faith, Family, and Beef, the blog, 10 years ago this February. Like, it's been 10 years since I started blogging.
Oh, look at that. Happy little anniversary as it starts to change into something else.
Yeah. And so I was just blogging for a while, and then I took on some freelance work for a magazine, and I still write for the magazine. And then I brought on some hats, apparel, with a great phrase. It says, "Beef builds beautiful bodies, see below." Oh, it's so great.
Terryn's known for a good pun every now and then.
I love puns. I've never met one I didn't like. So then I had that going on, and then I was getting asked to speak about my blogging journey. And I was just, that whole transition period that we talked about from 2016 to 18 to after that, it wasn't until 2021 that I really realized, like, I want to do something with this idea of good movement and the Enneagram and how it all melds together. Because the good movement isn't just self-awareness and the Enneagram, but the Enneagram does expedite self-awareness. And so it made sense to use that tool in my good movement. So I started coaching at some retreats, doing workshops at events in 2022, going to ranches and doing trainings. And then at the beginning of last year, I was traveling a lot. My first quarter of 2023 was a lot of travel, which wasn't okay. The travel was okay. Doing the trainings was amazing. And I was bringing in income on less of actual hours of, I'm using air quotes, work.
So your margin in those offers skyrocketed compared to what you had been previously offering and doing in your writing or small quantity product sales. But that required you to be away from the ranch and home.
Yes. And I wasn't spending hours packaging product. I still have some that I'm working on moving. Hence the message from Sheila to get my inventory count. But yes, the margins were better. But in May, my dad passed away, and I had always planned on taking the summer off and kind of marketing my services, but not traveling, because the summer is the busiest time for us here on the ranch. But through that time, I didn't. Let me backtrack. I did not market my services during that time. I just basically fell off the face of the social media earth and did nothing, which was okay, because I got to do a lot of reflection, and I realized that I want to do these trainings for people, and I want to help them with their relationships and become more self-aware, but I don't want to be off the ranch that much. So I decided to kind of reformulate what I'm doing. And now I am offering, I call it the Good Movement Collective, but it's a 6-month group coaching program for emotionally tapped rural women who are ready to clearly and confidently communicate so that they can eliminate overwhelm and experience joy in their relationships, whether that's relationships with their spouse, their in-laws, their parents, their brothers, sisters, like relationships, blanket, umbrella type deal. And then I'm also hosting what I'm calling the Start With You Mastermind. And so that's for people who are really just dipping their toe into self-awareness. It's 3 months long. There's 2-hour workshops, one every month of the program. And we just kind of deep dive. The first one, you get to know your Enneagram. And then we deep dive into a couple of really helpful Enneagram centered topics. So that helps boost your self-awareness. And then the Good Movement Collective is for women who are emotionally tapped and know their Enneagram type already, because we're going way deep in that one. But then I'm also still offering I'm gearing it more to the family farm and ranch, but I will come and consult with you, and we can really tailor it to what your family and your dynamic needs. So those are the things that I'm offering now, but that allows me to be home more, because both the collective and the mastermind are virtual. And so I won't be traveling nearly as much as I was first quarter 2023.
Yeah. And I think that's something with business. It is just one big giant journey and one big experiment after another, right? You didn't know starting out that this is where you would end up. This is drastically different than what you started out as. You were very much advocate for the ag industry and helping bridge that gap between the consumers and those producing or raising the animals. Again, you were using your strength of seeing both sides and helping to share that message of like, okay, here's what you think is happening. Here's what's maybe actually happening. Let's have a real conversation. And that's where it started for you. But over time, you have adapted and adjusted. One, based on where you're at in motherhood and just your energy and time that you have available. And then two, as you gain additional skills and experience and tune into your own, what do I need and want out of this? How can I shift and adapt things? Let's try these trainings. They went really well. They were successful for the ranches that you traveled to. They got a lot out of them, but you realized long term that wasn't going to work. So let's shift and adapt. How do we take what we learned from that and change it? And so I think that is another really important piece of self-awareness is like our businesses can evolve and adapt. We can let go of parts that we were previously doing that no longer align for the current season.
And sometimes letting go can be a slow burn, i.e. my store.
You still have products that I bug you every month to get rid of.
And at the beginning, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can let it go. I don't know. And now I'm just like, let's burn it all down.
There does become a point that it feels so much easier to let go. Like, I think it is once you are able to step in that new direction just enough, right? Whether it be something like changing your offers or changing how you price something or changing your packaging or stepping into a new audience, you have to get there just enough. And then it's like, oh yeah, rip that Band-Aid off. I'm done.
Yeah.
I won't go back to that again.
And I will say too that part of it is my motivation of keeping the peace. Like, even though I did not love printing labels and packaging boxes, it was familiar and comfortable, therefore peaceful for me.
Yes.
However, there are other types out there that are not as change averse as I am. Some types really enjoy new things, exhilarating things. There are even types that love change so much that they have trouble following through and like committing to one thing. They're jumping from offer to offer to offer to offer, which maybe isn't necessarily the best thing either.
Right.
But that is the benefit of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
When I know that I don't like change and I have to make change in my business, it helps me go ahead and do that because now I know, like, do I not want to make this change because it's not the right change, or is it because I'm just dragging my feet because I'm stuck in comfort?
Yeah.
If you're a person who loves change, do I want to make this change because it's the right change, or because I'm bored with this other one, or because it wasn't fun anymore, or,
can I bring that excitement in somewhere
Yes.
else in my life and have a little bit more consistency in my business?
Yes.
But bring in that adventure
Yes.
attitude from something else.
Yes.
In the same that, yes, the uniqueness, maybe it could just be boring and standard because that's really what people need.
Yeah. But okay, I'm going to tell a little story on you.
Oh boy.
When we were, maybe I should have told this earlier when we were talking about how we learned our types, but I remember, and I actually know a few other fours who have had this struggle, but you were hesitant to admit you were a four or like embrace your fourness for a while because you're like, I'm a CPA. That's not creative. That's numbers and that's boring. And I was like, yeah, but you are not like a regular CPA. You're like a cool CPA. I gotta be honest, I've never even seen that movie, but I felt like the quote applied there.
Yeah. And I have a shirt that's I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom. And I didn't even know what it was from. There's this company that makes Mother's Day shirts every year. Bo had gotten that one for me. And I think I took it to the hospital when we had our youngest and they told me what it was from.
It's Mean Girls. If you don't know, it's from Mean Girls.
Which I don't think I've actually sat and watched that movie either.
Well, okay, so that's
we could quote Bridesmaids all day long for you.
Oh,
but
right. Well,
Mean Girls is not.
So
anyway, back to the story.
But also Mean Girls, very popular movie. But Sheila and I, this is another layer deeper of the Enneagram. We're both part of the withdrawing stance. And in the withdrawing stance, we're very inward focused. And so that means we don't follow the crowd a lot. And so when everyone's watching Mean Girls, we're over here like not caring about Mean Girls.
But that does bring up, I should have that shirt made for my next branding session so I can have that noted.
You're not a regular CPA, you're a cool CPA.
I'm a cool CPA.
But yeah, you had a hard time accepting that you were a 4. And I think and other 4s have that too. But because they are so motivated by uniqueness, they have a hard time accepting their uniqueness or like sliding into that 4 space and accepting it.
Yeah. And we look at the flaws of that or like where that makes us. And so we're not looking at it as the strength of, I want to be different.
Yeah. You should really use air quotes when you say flaws because they're not. They're perceived flaws.
Okay. Perceived flaws, air quotes on my podcast.
Just saying. Just a little real-time coaching.
Okay. So yeah, I did. That also goes back to when I was making the decision to leave public accounting the first time that you remember.
Oh, I
do. Remember. It was while I was pregnant. I feel like it was a 9-month thing. The number of conversations, the number of times that I cried at the office because I was so confused and felt so torn. And yet that who am I or what would I do if I am not at this firm, am not on this path that I have been working towards for the last how many years. But I could see it didn't align with the type of mother and wife that I wanted to be and still have some career. Like I didn't want to give up either side. And I struggled hardcore with that decision. And now I'm like, gosh, darn, we talk about ripping the Band-Aid off. Like now we're making changes and decisions all the time. And I don't let any of that define who I am. But I've worked at this one place since college. I've been this, I have this job title. I worked really hard to get here. Who would I be? What would I go do if I weren't doing this?
And from my outside perspective and knowing what we know now, I can totally see where this was a place where you got to, I'm going to use air quotes now, the ideal, because 4s get this idealistic version of how their life is going to go.
Could also be air quotes fantasy.
Yes. And then you got there. It didn't live up to your ideal, your fantasy, your expectation. And now you're like, what do I do? I've been planning for this and moving towards this my whole life. It kind of sucks. And now I don't know what to do. And so, I mean, like knowing what we know now, had we known that back then, you would have been moving and changing without even thinking twice about it. You wouldn't have been stuck.
Right. And that's what I do now, knowing that. But I think that was a huge thing that changed the trajectory of my life. And I learned so much about myself in the process because, again, when we look at self-awareness, it made me step back and come up with a new definition of who I am or what else makes up my whole being outside of what this external job title and external metrics would tell me I am. So it was like I really got to fill in that story that I had been missing for myself. And now, like you said, with the withdrawing, like we don't really care what other people are doing or how they're going about it. We're going to do our thing.
I'm glad that you brought that up because you did that. You went through that whole journey without knowing the Enneagram. And it brought you self-aware. Like you became more self-aware during that process. And so I just want to say, like, if the Enneagram isn't your thing or you don't want to do that, self-awareness still is. And so you can use trials. You can go in, like when we're talking about going into the deep end and exploring your feelings and stuff, and that you can really learn a lot from it. This is what we're talking about. Because you can use those things and those experiences, and it doesn't even have to be a lot. You can do a little or a lot. A little bit of reflection goes a long way to understanding yourself and being more self-aware. You don't need the Enneagram. Is it a helpful tool? Yeah, but you don't need it to be self-aware. And you got self-awareness through the whole process of becoming self-employed.
Yeah. And I like to now explain it as a journey of curiosity, right? When you are faced with a decision or a situation, just get curious as to one, your own, why is this feeling hard for me? Or what is coming up here? Is there another way to look at this? And then going back to what Terryn does now with communication with other people, using that same curiosity with them, like what could possibly be coming up for them that I'm not thinking of initially in this, or just being curious. I think curiosity allows us to do a lot of that without judgment, right? If we're just getting curious, again, it's like we're doing some sort of science experiment that is just interesting and
we're going to see where it leads.
Exploring without having a true like end purpose as to what the journey of where we're going.
One bandwagon we did jump on was Ted Lasso. And there's a really great scene in Ted Lasso where he misquotes Walt Whitman. It's not Walt Whitman's quote, but it's great. It's be curious, not judgmental. And he's talking about that very thing, like asking people questions before you make assumptions. And he's specifically talking about other people asking questions, but you can use the same principle with yourself.
Yeah. And the one thing I will fight you on is that is the best theme song that you could possibly have. My husband and I, every time we watched an episode, he would make fun of me for it because how can you not just like bop along to it? It's not that long.
Yeah.
But you
don't hit skip intro.
Yeah. Terryn and I are also Law & Order SVU fans. And if you don't sing along to the bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 like, who are you?
Remember in college when that was my ringtone on my flip phone?
Okay. Now that we've gotten into odd topics,
we've gone off the rails and we're getting back on.
Now we're back to normal banter between us and the standard conversation we often have. The other thing that I love about Terryn is she jumps from topic to topic. I don't know. Is that a 9 thing? Or is that just a you thing?
I think that it could be either. Because 9s, and this is way deeper, but our centers of intelligence and how we use them, 9s are in their head a ton. And so there's a whole bunch of things going on up here that no one else has any idea about. And sometimes we'll just like, let it out our mouth.
Yeah. So you can be having a conversation with Terryn and we'll be talking about cows 1 minute. And then the next minute she's telling me about this joke her kid told her or something like totally unrelated. And then you go back to like a story she was telling you from 2 weeks ago.
I can tell you how I got there. It's a journey.
So we joked, Terryn's husband, Tom, who's on her podcast as a guest often, the 3 of us lived together in college and we called them Circle T moments because Tom and I, even though it was more of a line, because there was just 2 of us and not a circle. But we were like over here in this circle and Terryn was like off just floating outside the circle somewhere in her thought on what she was. And so then we would stop the conversation and we would literally do the like backtrack of how she got from this topic all the way to that topic and like the 6 places she was in between, just so Tom and I could begin to understand the journey that we were going on from topic to topic. And now I roll with it, and I'm totally used to it, that we're going to talk about one thing and then it's going to be something else the next message I get from her.
I've gotten better at prefacing with, this is way off the topic. Even though I don't have to, because Sheila knows.
Okay, so the one question that I am bringing in for all my guest episodes is, since this podcast is specifically about empowering women and the female business owner, what is something that you have learned about money in your self-awareness journey, or another tip that you have for other business owners when it comes to like money or finances?
Well, one thing that I've known for a while, but it has become exceedingly apparent since the last time that I cleaned off my dresser and nightstand, is that I am pretty complacent when it comes to money. Not necessarily complacent with the spending of money, because typically for smaller purchases, I know, and for bigger ones, I consult Sheila. But putting money into my account, people pay me, and then my checks, if it's not direct deposit, sit. I didn't find any business checks on my nightstand, so that's good. But they'd sit.
Because we've built some systems for you.
Yes.
And I now go in on a regular basis and say, hey, do you have a check from this person? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me go get that deposited.
And that speaks to knowing that I need help with that. And Sheila holds me accountable. But I found $735 last time I cleaned my dresser, the top of my dresser, and my nightstand off. Now, it wasn't all cash. It was a $125 Amazon gift card, a $50 Visa gift card, $60 in cash, and a $500 check that I found in my wallet whilst putting the cash that I found on the nightstand in it. So total $735. Also, I'm not very good at math, so that might be wrong addition there. But regardless, lots of money. So I recognize that I am pretty complacent with specifically depositing money. And I think that stems from, to be honest, I'm a little complacent with depositing checks like we discussed, so Sheila has to ask me about it. But it just stems from like my motivation of keeping the peace and my default of it is what it is, and like not getting too worked up about any of that. And so that, like, my money mindset is generally one of not being too worked up about it, which can also be a problem sometimes. But it's an area where I have become aware, and because I'm aware of that, I can ask for help in that area.
Yeah. And we have a lot of conversations now because of that it's Terryn will come up with an idea. This is what I want to do. And I get to be the one that brings into the conversation, okay, what are the financial implications or benefits, or what's our financial motivation, if you will, behind that? Because again, keeping the peace, she would do all of it for free.
True dat.
If she didn't have me sometimes coming into the conversation and saying, okay, but there is value to this. Let's set up the systems so that we can exchange the value between the two people that are involved.
Yes. And that's one thing that I really love about you as my bestie, but also as a team member in my business, which is what I think of you as, like we're team.
Yeah.
Is that you come to those conversations and you're not like immediately no or immediately yes. You ask me, it's a curiosity, a journey of curiosity.
Yeah.
You ask me all kinds of questions. I get to hear my own answers. And at the end of it, you're like, so why aren't you doing it already? Or maybe let's not do that.
Please repeat what you just said so that you can hear it again from yourself.
But usually it's, why aren't you doing that already? Because I am in my head so much as a 9. I do make good decisions. I just have a hard time pulling the trigger on the decisions.
Yes, very much so. So with that in mind, getting help where you need help because you're self-aware and know those areas that can propel you forward by having that support is so important. And the whole thing is a journey. And so just becoming curious all along the way of where am I coming into this with maybe a potential hurdle? Where can I help myself? And where can I ask others to help me? Is, I think, are some of the self-awareness journey. If you have enjoyed Terryn's banter and her random puns in this episode, be sure to check out her podcast, Good Movement Draws Good Movement.
Which also has a really great theme song.
I was just going to say, she took the Ted Lasso theme and made sure her podcast had a very good intro and outro that you can listen to. So check out her weekly podcast. And you can find more about how to connect with her and follow her in the show notes. But I am so blessed that I got to introduce my audience and the followers here on the podcast to my bestie, Terryn. So thank you for coming on and having this conversation about self-awareness.
Thanks for having me. As always, it was a fantastically fun conversation.
Yes. And I can't wait to continue to bring you weekly episodes on other topics that relate to empowering females and their finances. So continuing to listen is in your best interest. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Profitable Women. Make sure you never miss an episode by hitting the follow button in your favorite podcast player. And things are always easier when you talk about them with a friend, so be sure to share this episode with them. If you're looking for more ways to grow your financial confidence, head to the show notes for a link to subscribe to our weekly email. Until next time.